Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi, and welcome back to episode number 59. I've got some really exciting news this week, but I'm saving it for a little later. In fact, I've got two exciting bits of news, both of which I'll be sharing with you after our main interview. This week, I've got the son of one of our listeners. I'm speaking with Silas Schroeder, or Pepper, a newly minted through hiker of the class of 2017. A few weeks ago, I received an email from Rick Schroeder, Silas's very, very proud dad. Rick was emailing me to thank me for the podcast, and while he had my attention, he told me about Silas. I liked what I read and decided to get in touch with Silas, who was happy to come on the show. Later in Rick's email, he said that our show had inspired him to give the trail a go. He also hiked with Silas for a few days and, as you'll hear soon, shared a very, very important moment with his son on the AT. Silas will be along soon. We've got another excellent doc spot for you this week, with Lynn Savino telling us all about hypothermia and what to do if you get it. The day that Lynn and I spoke, we recorded 2 episodes. The first was this one about hypothermia, and the second was, of all things, on frostbite. Don't make a face and ignore frostbite. It is easier to get than you may think. These chats took me back to my hike and a terrifying 7-degree night in the Smokies. Makes you think, I can tell you. Today is also the last episode of my second book and the end of my journey with you. I got a bit emotional reading the last page, so I hope that you've stuck with it from the beginning. Remember, next week I'll be starting Earl Schaefer's book, Walking with Spring. I cannot wait. Now, a clearly well-brought-up young man, Silas Schroeder. He kept referring to me as Sir. Call me old-fashioned, but it works for me every time. Here's Silas, or Pepper. Okay, I'd like to introduce to the youngest of 5 siblings, adventurous siblings apparently, according to their father, who's one of our listeners. And this young man, his name's Silas Schroeder, or Dr. Pepper. Hi, Silas. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Well, how are you doing? Because first of all, congratulations on completing the trail so young. You finished on September the 15th. How are you feeling?
Yes, sir. I'm feeling good. It's interesting getting used to being back and everything, but feeling like ready to go hike again.
Oh, really? Already? I wasn't ready to go. I wasn't ready to walk again after I finished for about 3 months. It was
yeah.
That's one of the benefits of being younger, I've no doubt. So
Maybe
now
so.
I understand you turned 22 on the trail itself in August. And where did you celebrate that?
Yeah, I was in Vermont and Warren, close to where it's the sign that says 500 miles left to Katahdin. So I celebrated it there. I had my kind of tramway, my group of friends there too. So I woke up that morning and they brought me into town with a hotel room and Oreos and milk, everything that I wanted. So it was pretty fun. It was a pretty good day.
Oreo, isn't that a different life experience, eh? Oreos and milk was your celebration for your 22nd birthday. How about that?
Yes.
And I bet you loved it as well, didn't you?
Right, yeah, it was the best thing ever.
I'm sure. Now, your father says that you're on a bit of a sabbatical from college, though when he wrote to me, he did seem to have some doubts about that. What does he mean by you're on a sabbatical from college?
So yeah, I went off to New Mexico about a year ago, or a little over a year ago, to work out there, and that was supposed to be like, my year off, kind of explore, learn who you are, everything like that. And I called them halfway through that and said, you know what, I think after this, I'm going to extend it just a little bit longer and do one more thing. I think I'm going to go on a hike. And they were all for it. My dad was especially all for it. But they said, okay, well, when you come back, it's going to be school. You're not going to go on another hike, are you? I said, I don't know. We'll see.
So it's a gap. So is it you've had a sort of gap year and a half, have you?
Right. Yes, sir. So it's been fun, and I do want to go on another hike, but I want to get college done, set it behind me, and then go on another one.
Quite right too. But I must say, though, I think this is a fantastic education for somebody just before or just after college anyway. And the fact that yours happens to be partway through college, so what? It's an experience you're never going to get anywhere else in the world. So, why would you want to miss that? And I think your father, I know he's very enthusiastic about hiking. So I'm glad he was on board with you.
Definitely. That's one of the things my parents said. They said, if you want to go out and hike the trail, that's education in a different form, and we'll help support you while you're out there and everything like that if you ever need anything. So if you're out there, we're paying for your education. If you need any money or anything at all, just let us know and we'll help you support there, because we're all about your education right now. And
that's awesome.
They're very,
that is so awesome.
very, very encouraging. Yeah.
You're another example, by the way, Silas, of someone who realises how supportive we all are when we're on the trail. Even though it's an individual, single endeavour, you couldn't have done this without the support of your folks, which is a fantastic thing.
Definitely.
Yeah. Now, so why did you actually choose the AT? Because if you were out in New Mexico, the PCT would have been right on your doorstep, wouldn't it?
Right. Yes, sir. I actually, when I was living in New Mexico, it was kind of my roommate's dream, and I didn't know what the AT was at first. And he was talking to me. He said, "Oh, I want to go hike this long distance trail on the East Coast," and it's been like 6 months doing that. And I didn't know what it was, so I went on Google and I looked it up and said, "Man, we can do that this year. Like, let's start planning and saving for it and getting gear and stuff." And he was all about it too, but too bad, like, he couldn't unfortunately come this year. But I was like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna stick to it and try and do it this year.
So what was the attraction then? Was it the big? I mean, like me, I'd never heard of it in my life. But I was living in the UK at the time, but I'd never heard of it. And the thought of this amazing long trail, and America is blessed with so many of them, as I'm sure you know now. So the AT was really because he said, "Let's do the AT," and you thought about that one first. From the fact that you've done it, are you glad with your choice that you went to the AT instead of the PCT?
Yeah, I would say so. I think it was a really good social trail, and it was really good to meet people out there and stuff. And I know the PCT is getting bigger and bigger too with population and stuff, but I think I want to have changed it. I want to have done it differently. I'm glad I started there with the AT.
Yeah. So, did you have any previous hiking experience at all, or because it's a funny thing, I found that people with no hiking experience often do think, "Oh, well, I think I'll do the Appalachian Trail," as if it was, let's just go and do the Appalachian Trail, and not having had any hiking experience. And I was one of those people as well. And yet, so we weren't daunted, I think, because we didn't know what it was like. Had we known what it was like, we might not have done it in some cases.
Right. I had a little hiking experience. I grew up with my dad, taking us to hikes and everything, but nothing too crazy. I think my first hiking experience was when I was 18. I decided me and my friend from Dallas, Texas would go on a hike out in Arkansas, Buckeye Trail, and we went out and we thought, it'll take 2 days. Ended up taking 4 days, and it's nothing like I expected it to be. Afterwards, he asked me, he was like, "Do you like hiking?" I said, honestly, I don't. And I thought that'd be the end of my my hiking experience there. I was like, that's enough. But yeah, that kind of changed when I moved out to New Mexico. I went on a couple more hikes, but yeah, nothing long term like this trip.
Why did you think that you could do it? I love the way you said that earlier on. You said, "We can totally do this. We can really do this." Why did you think you could do a 2,200-mile hike?
Yeah, I don't know. I think part of it has to do with the fact that my parents always told me, you can do anything that you set your mind out to believe. And I know it's kind of a cliche, but I grew up really believing that. And I thought, if I want to do something, just put my efforts into it and I can make it happen, And I remember right when I started too, it was kind of interesting hearing all the people say, like, "Do you think you're going to make it?" Or, "This percentage of people don't make it," or, "Oh, we're at the point in time where, 18% drop out," or all this stuff. And the whole time I kept on thinking, like, you can do it. Like, if you push hard enough, you can definitely make it happen.
Did you ever have any doubts while you're on the trail whether you were going to be able to do it or not?
No doubts. Well, I had a few times that I was like, yeah, I want to quit. But
that's a different thing. That's a different thing, isn't it? Thinking you might want to quit because you're not enjoying it that day or something like that is different to thinking, "I just can't do this," but you never had any thought that you couldn't do it.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Right. So what were you hoping to get from the trail? Because you must have read up about it a bit and realised that for most people, this is a transformational experience. Were you hoping to get anything from the trail?
I was hoping to go out there and it was kind of a trip for me to know that I can put my all into something and finish it and to like completion and do it well. Yeah, do something to completion. Even on the days that like, it was really rough, or later on when I was like, man, I don't want to do this. I had other hikers be like, why are you even out here still if you do it? And I was like, it's about completing it. Like, not every moment's going to be rainbows and, easy skipping along a trail. It's going to be hard, but a big part about the trail for me was just the satisfaction of like doing it and finishing it on the good days and the bad days.
Well, I've had conversations with some people recently about whether it's the journey itself or it's the destination. For me, it was the journey for the first, 1,600 miles, but definitely for the last 500 or 600 miles, it was the destination. I wanted to get there to get that picture of the top of Katahdin. But, before that, it was too far away to think of. For me, it was the journey to start with. But for you, often it was the destination, was it?
Right, I think so. In my mindset, it was more about the destination, which looking back at it, it was definitely the journey that that I enjoyed and that I'll remember forever. And that really made my trip. But my mindset of like push me was getting it, getting there, getting to the destination I had set out to get to.
I tell you, there's nothing, even on a bad day, just looking up at that picture of yourself on that brown sign of Katahdin, that makes you feel darn good, doesn't it? That really does make you feel good.
Yeah.
Now, do you feel that this was a good age at which you could appreciate a long distance hike? Would you recommend it for people of your age?
I would definitely recommend it. I think it's a really good learning opportunity to really see the world and get out there and kind of have a better understanding of, even just the East Coast and people that you meet along the way. So there's a lot of stereotypes that, I don't know, I just kind of believe, the North, people in the North are mean and cold, and everyone there just, very different. But my encounters with everyone in the North was great. Like, people were so nice, and I just learned so many different things along that way, that really broadened my perspective of, people and the world. And I think it was really good to do at this age, because I come back with a very different mindset of what I want to do with my following years. So I think it was good. I would encourage people my age to do it, and people older, really people of any age. I feel like you can always put yourself out there to learn new things and challenge yourself. Did
you meet the guy? Is it Greybeard, the 82-year-old guy on the trail?
Yes, sir. I hiked with Greybeard for a little while.
Oh, did you?
It was a fun time.
Did he outpace you? Did he outpace you in the end?
Yes, I passed him a couple times when he was heading actually southbound. He was going south on the trail for a bit, and then I caught him again when we were entering Maine, and he was hiking north. So we got to talk and catch up there, and got to get to know him. But 82 years old, and he's doing great out there.
That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Okay, now let's talk about the hike itself. When we spoke before, you told me that you originally intended to go southbound. Why did you change your mind? Why did you ever think of going southbound in the first place?
That's actually funny. I planned to go southbound. I didn't know too much about the trail, so I was looking it up, and my idea of it was, I'm going to be alone the whole time anyways, and I didn't even realize, I'm glad I went northbound, because the social aspect of it, I think, is bigger, and definitely it's, it gets prettier and prettier as long along the trail as you're heading north, and glad I did that. But I intended to go southbound just because of the way my school is going to line up and everything. I thought, if I start in the summer and head down, that'd be perfect, because my work and my school would end, close to the beginning of summer. So I was like, I don't want to start in April and everything. I have stuff to get done, but luckily I got free of all that. And my parents were like, if you want to start earlier and you don't have enough money saved up, we can definitely help you with that and give you some of the money that you need to go ahead and start and stop working. So I said, that sounds good. I guess I'll do it. And my dad, he had always kind of wanted to do the trail and researched a lot. He said, I don't think you're going to regret changing to go Nobo instead of Sobo. And he was definitely right.
So you finished 15 September. When did you start?
I started April 1st.
April 1st. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Yeah. And how did you find the trail culture? And I'm sure it changes from year to year. You know what I mean by that, how people behave on the trail and generally relax and stuff. How did you find the trail culture?
It was really interesting. It wasn't anything like I expected it to be. There was almost cultures inside the culture itself. There were different groups and different type of people that you meet along the way, different trail families, and you almost find that you kind of go towards like-minded people like yourself, and it was really cool. I naturally met people pretty quickly on the trail that you're splitting motel rooms with, or you're getting hitches into town with, or hiking with. So
when you're older, Silas, you tend to avoid sharing hotel rooms with a bunch of smelly people. You tend to prefer to be the smelly person yourself, but then you hear next door there's about 5 or 6 people in the same room. So God bless them.
Exactly.
Yeah. But then, didn't you also find, though, which I think is great, even though you were with like-minded people, you could relate to everybody on the trail, couldn't you? Because we all had that same ambition, didn't we, of hiking the Appalachian Trail? So there was a mutual respect amongst everybody, wasn't there?
Definitely. That shared hardship creates like very unique bonds that you know what each other like is going through, and how you're feeling and everything, and you all have the same goal and the same kind of steps in front of you. So it's cool. It's cool to talk to people and see where they've been and where they're going, and know that you're exactly in the same place.
Yeah. Now, why were you Dr. Pepper, by the way? Were you named by somebody else, or did you give yourself the name before you went out there?
I was named by my trail family. I went through a few names before I kept the one that I got.
Oh, tell us what they were, just in case people met you and met you as a different name. What were your other names?
I was named... There was a moment I was named Jingles. Right. That was the main one that almost stuck, because I started with the bear bell. And the first day, it just about drove me insane. And I went into the restroom of this gas station, and I got a lot of toilet paper, and I shoved it full of it. And I was like, okay, this will stop it for sure, but I'll carry it just in case I ever need it. And it would still just jingle slightly. And everyone knew that I was on edge because of it. And everyone kept on calling me, hey, Jingles, you going to catch up or whatever. And the first trash can I saw, we came to one of those little parking lots with a bathroom and trash can. I threw that thing away so quickly. I said, that is not, I can give you my trail name. And from there.
So how'd you get Dr. Pepper then?
I got Dr. Pepper. I would pack out either a 2-liter of Dr. Pepper or a few cans of Dr. Pepper. And then when I would summit a really hard climb, I would give myself a little bit of Dr. Pepper as a reward. And people just started calling me Dr. Pepper. And then it got shortened over time to just Pepper.
Oh, really? I didn't realize. So your actual trail name at the end was Pepper.
Right.
Now, I understand also, and this is interesting, you're the first person I know who's actually done this, or I've actually interviewed, I believe, that you aquablazed some of the trail. First explain that, and then we'll talk about it on the other end of you explaining what that is. Yeah,
so aquablazing, you get this chance in Waynesboro, Virginia, or there's actually a couple different places that you can do it. But in my case, I got off in Waynesboro, Virginia, and we got a boat with kind of a rafting company, and they gave us a canoe. And the trail kind of follows in the Shenandoah Mountains, the Shenandoah River. So we were able to kind of split the price, and me and my group of friends, we got our boats and got in the river for about 100 miles, and then instead of hiking that 100 miles, got to paddle it downstream and take a load off of our feet. And, I imagined it to be very different. I imagined, we're just going to be sitting there relaxing and be nice, but it was a lot more paddling than I expected. But it was just fun in itself. It kind of was a little bit of a change. And at that time, we all had Virginia blues, coming towards the end of it. So it was good to mix it up for a little bit.
And so do you think you'll ever hike that 100 miles you missed out or not?
Maybe so, if I'm back in the area or not. But
I tell you why. I tell you what. My opinion is this is a fantastic thing to do. It breaks the whole thing up. Some people will say, "Well, you're not a real through hiker. You didn't do the full 2190 mile, whatever it is the mileage is this year." But for me, this is a prime example of hike your own hike. Do what you want to do. It's your journey. You still hiked 2,100 miles, and you hiked the Appalachian Trail because you aquablazed it. So for me, I think it's a fantastic thing to do. And had I realised it existed, I think I might have tried it myself as well. But and the only place you're going to get downers will be on Facebook. So as far as I was concerned, I'd ignore them if I were you. If you ever hear any of that, it must have been a great experience, wasn't it?
Definitely, it was an awesome experience, and I think it's really important while you're out there hiking. I mean, I think a lot of people this year, at least that I know, kind of just did whatever they want and tried whatever they want. And the thing is, it's your hike, exactly, and you're going to do it the way you need to do it.
Totally.
Complete it. And if that includes the river, then that includes the river, and that's your thing. And you have independent-minded people out there. We're not all following each other's steps. So you're getting
Yeah.
a lot of different type of trailers, and it's kind of
How
cool.
long did it take you to cover that 100 miles?
It took us about 4 days to cover that.
And what
100
would you
miles.
do? You just pull up at the side of the river, get out and camp right by the side of the river?
Yeah, actually, that was pretty interesting too. They told us there'd be places we could camp and gave us a little map, and we went out there, and it was a little rough. We trying to find out where to camp and stuff. A lot of the land was private land or privately owned or parkland with like rangers that would tell you you're not allowed to camp here or whatever. So that was cool too, like a little bit of an adventure looking for someplace where we could actually sleep.
Yeah.
So we'd start the day off and just like, okay, keep your eye out for any place that looks like a campsite, that we could go to. And then there was some paid camping on the side, like $4 paid camping with a little grocery store to get ice and keep our food cool for a bit.
Yeah. I think that's a really cool thing to do. I must say, I think it's a tremendous little addition to it, and it's something different. And I think people should consider that going forward. I want to get emails telling me they shouldn't consider it, by the way, but I will, as you should, totally ignore those emails because
Right.
This is, as I say, this is your hike. This is fun for you, and I absolutely applaud you for doing it. And where do you come out then? If you get on at Waynesboro, where did you actually get back on the AT?
So we got out close to Harper's Ferry, and then we kind of went over the roller coaster area, entering Harper's Ferry. And once we got there,
All right.
a few of us went into DC area to meet some people, and then a few of us hung out there for a while. That's where my sister actually came and hiked with me. She met me in Harper's Ferry, and we hiked a little bit.
Cool.
That's
Very
West
cool.
Virginia. So, yeah.
Now I know you didn't do an extensive bunch of videos on YouTube, but I saw a couple and you were with a few people, and that was your trail family you were with at the time, I presume.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. And how did that form, and how long were you together?
That formed, it was actually pretty close to the 100-mile marker. So we had all just kind of started, and 2 of the girls that hiked with us started together, and the rest of us were solo hikers. And the time that I got connected with that group, we were stuck in Franklin, and there were a few forest fires. So I planned to leave, but we couldn't go back out. So we're stuck in Franklin, and we all just kind of hung out there at the Lazy Hiker and enjoyed our time there, and went back and played cards and everything and got to know each other better.
Nice.
And from there on, I was like, these are cool people. Like, I definitely want to get to know them better and be around them. And they felt the same way. So we just started hiking together and kind of talking about, where do y'all want to camp tonight? We would kind of plan out, where do you want to camp or what town do you want to get to? And we'd all still hike alone.
Yes.
And then every now and then we would, hike together for a short section, like to the Grayson Highlands. But that's how that kind of formed. We just said, these are cool places to camp. Let's try and get there together and do that. And we were together.
I'm about to say, did you stay with them for a long time?
Yeah, we were together until the very end. So there were parts where, like, I got off for wedding, and Jenny and all them got off for different family things, different events. But we always managed to catch up within a week to each other. So we stayed together until the very end.
So you summited with your trail family. How many of you went up together?
We didn't summit together. We camped at the base together, and each of us had our family kind of coming in. So we all decided, we talked about it. Yeah.
That's
so we
interesting.
talked about it and said, we said, it would be really cool to summit with y'all, but I know for me, I said, it's really important for me to be with my dad on that day, and he was coming a little later, and, they all kind of agreed, like, we want to be with our family. And so we all summited alone with our families and stuff, and then we ended up having a party at the very end, kind of back in Millinocket, and enjoyed getting to meet each other's families and all hang out there and talk about our summit and how it went and everything.
That's cool. What was the feeling when you knew it was over? You went and touched the brown sign, and it must have been very emotional for you and your father, I'm sure. From the email he sent me, I'm sure it was very emotional for him. How did you feel about it at the time when you touched that sign?
It's weird. It's like it's a very out of body kind of feeling. I got up there and it felt very surreal to see the sign and to get somewhere. It felt like every mountain, as much as I appreciated and loved the hike going up to it, was almost a false summit leading up to this main summit. And right when I got there, it was overwhelming. And there were a few other hikers up there when I got there, but no through hikers that I saw when I summited. And I guess they noticed I looked a little rough, so they kind of guessed that I was a hiker, and they all they started clapping for me, and it was really nice. And they were all really encouraging, and I really enjoyed, being up there. And that's the thing with it is a little crowded on Katahdin. Some people get frustrated about that, but I think as social as the trail is, that's part of it, is going up there and having people that are encouraging you and being up at the top and having fun with it and getting up there. But yeah, it was incredible. I was sad that it was over, but also very excited it was over.
I'm sure, and you got your pictures, which is always a great thing. I must admit, I'd forgotten how scummy I looked at the end, because when I went back to trail days, I went to trail days this year to talk about the podcast to a number of people and interview some people at trail days. I was shocked how dirty some of the hikers were. Then I thought back to myself, and I spoke to my wife about it. She said, "You were absolutely filthy nearly all the time," and so you forget what others are like, or you forget what you were like when you're hiking. And when I think back a bit, I'm kind of shocked at myself in some ways, but you do forget these things very easily. So did you find, now you told us about your parents helping you out, did you find though the trail was more expensive than you'd expected it to be?
It was a little less expensive. I had
really?
I had watched a lot of YouTube videos, and a lot of people were telling me, around $1,000 a month is what you kind of want to do. And I did around $500 a month kind of thing.
Wow.
So it was less expensive than I thought it was going to be. But I did have a few things I wasn't expecting, like gear problems, that you have to fix. And I thought it was going to add up to be a little bit more, but it did not.
Oh, that's good. That's good. And most people have told me in the past, take half. What's the expression? Lay all the gear out you want to take and all the money you want to take on your bed, and then take twice the money and half the gear. And that seems to be the way it is for most people, I think. And your father told me that he'd noticed a real change in your confidence since you'd done this. Have you seen that in yourself? Right. Do you feel it in yourself?
Definitely. I think you change a lot when you're out there, and it's really interesting coming back. That's another thing with kind of getting used to coming back to this place is everyone, you're back to your old life, and a lot of times it feels like everyone sees you the same and you feel completely different. But I've had a few people tell me that, something's different about you, and we just can't put our finger on it. And I just think, you know more about yourself, and you know more about what you want out of life, and how to do that and how to get that. And so I think there's a big change, but
I'm sure actually that's going to manifest itself more in the coming months as well. This is still early in your reintegration back to normal life, and you're right. People still see you. I guess you were Silas before, and you're Silas now, but you're Silas with a 6-month edge, which is definitely a different thing. And do you think you learned even more than the confidence? You learn more about yourself on the trip?
You do. I think so. I think you get to know yourself really well out there, even if you don't want to at times, and you're listening to podcasts or blaring music and trying to zone out. You have a lot of time to think and kind of decide what you want out of life and what you want out of your relationships. And I know one day I just thought, today I'm going to think of all the generic questions people ask: your favorite color, favorite movie, favorite everything. And I answered all those questions like, what's next? I guess I got to start going deeper, So you do answer a lot of questions.
Yes, that's interesting. I was asking myself questions about my bad behaviour in the past. I suspect at your age you've had very little bad behaviour in the past, so so you had to think about your favourite colour and your favourite movie. Quite right too. Yeah.
Right.
So now, having not been a hiker before, do you now regard yourself a hiker? And if you do, what do you think you're going to take on next?
That's an interesting question. It's weird. I kind of don't feel like a hiker, but I know I should. Like, I just did all these miles and stuff, and everyone thinks of me as this pro hiker or something. But I don't know. I'm kind of out of body with it. I don't really know. I definitely want to hike more and definitely want to get out and see more. To me, it's like, I hiked this one trail, but there's so much more out there that I still want to do. And it was a very, very hard trail and one that I definitely had to get through. But I think if I am not a pro hiker yet, maybe I'll eventually get there with later trails. But I think anyone that does the AT can tell you, like, it's very challenging, and you are a hiker after that.
Yeah, I must admit, I still find it difficult to call myself one, but I know I've done it, and because I've done it, I guess I must do. But we've probably done more hiking than 95%, maybe 99% of Americans, haven't we? And yet it doesn't feel like we have. We've done this long journey, and I don't know. I don't want to speculate what it means, because I'll tell you, man, 3 years after I finished, I still don't actually know what it means. So, you're going to be working out what the impact this has had on you for many years to come, and it's a wonderful thing to try to work out, I tell you. But I'm really delighted your father contacted me, and I'm glad I got in touch with you as well. You've done a tremendous thing for a young man of your age, and I know that when I spoke to a lot of the youngsters when I was on the trail, and no offence, I regard it in the 20s as a youngster, I think it's a fantastic thing to put on your resume. Once you finish college and you go out there in the world, you'll talk about your degree and how smart you are, which is great, but also put this on your resume, because this is an impressive thing. I would think if I was employing somebody now and I saw this on somebody's resume, I would be so impressed with their commitment more than anything else. And I think that's a thing that you should be proud. You should certainly be proud of.
Right, definitely. I'm excited about it.
I'm sure you are. Okay, mate. Well, thanks very much for spending the time with us, and we'll stay in touch. I'm thinking of returning to one or two people to ask a few other questions on another little segment I'm thinking of bringing back to the show. So thanks a lot, and hopefully we'll speak soon.
Awesome. Yes, sir. We'll talk to you later.
All the best. Bye-bye. What a great young man. And what a credit to his parents. I'm guessing that a few of you will be less than happy about Silas aquablazing with his tramley. If you are, please don't write to me about it. Silas eloquently explained what he thought about it, and I'm absolutely 100% behind him in that assessment. He's a thru hiker, no question. He hiked his own hike, a lesson that many of the people I've seen on social media this year would do well to learn. And wasn't it wonderful to hear Silas thanking his folks and their unstinting support of him in his adventure? I can see why it was important for him to go up Katahdin with his dad. By the way, I've been meaning to ask Silas's dad this. Wasn't Rick Schroeder that kid in that John Voight movie, The Champ? I think it was. He spent the whole bloody time crying from what I remember. I bet you had a few tears on Katahdin, didn't you, Rick? And now, I've got an announcement to make. I know that, until now, we haven't had any sponsors on the show, but that changes from today. As you know, I do love a sound effect. To celebrate the start of our brand new show, Returning to Katahdin and Appalachian Trail Dream, we are delighted to announce our new partnership for both shows with Trailtopia. For those of you scratching your heads with a quizzical look on your face, Trailtopia is a family-owned business that provides delicious and healthy meals for hikers up and down the country. Now, in case you're wondering if this is the script provided by Trailtopia for me to rattle off, you could not be more wrong. This stuff is terrific. We've all had lousy, freeze-dried foods on the trail, but this isn't one of them. Before we agreed to work together, I wanted to make sure that I'd be happy with their products, so they sent me some. The first thing that you notice is that the packs are shorter, wider, and tapered at the bottom. This means that you don't end up with a bunch of dry powder at the base of the pack. The bags have been custom engineered to make sure that everything gets rehydrated and everything is accessible with a shorter spoon. This is surprisingly compelling when you try them out. The main event, of course, is how they taste. I was sent some Bent Paddle Beer braised chicken stew. It was marvellous, really tasty, and not at all like some of its competitors. I asked them to send me something from their gluten-free selection, as my Diane has to eat gluten-free, and we got jambalaya. Amazing. If you'd like to try them out, just go to trailtopia.com and see their wide selection. Now, don't worry, that was just an introduction. The ads themselves are going to be about 30 to 45 seconds long, no more. I'm going to be having the owner of Trailtopia, Vince Robichaud, on the show next week to give you a little bit more information about his food. He's got quite the outdoor background, so he brings a lot of credibility to his products. Don't forget to look at the Trailtopia site at trailtopia.com. Now, pull your jacket around you and snuggle down your sleeping bag, as Lynn Savino tells us all about hypothermia and what to do if you get it. Okay, back with Lynn. Hi, Lynn. How are you?
I'm terrific.
Great. Now, Lynn sent me... this week's subject is hypothermia, and And it's something that, I didn't really think about on the trail at all. And there was a time when I got caught in the Smokies and it was darn freezing, got down to 7 degrees at night. So I certainly know it's a possibility. So tell us a little bit about hypothermia and what the conditions that can cause it then.
Sure. So the official definition is when your body loses more heat than it absorbs. And when your core body temperature gets down below 95 degrees Fahrenheit, that's when hypothermia is officially setting in.
Wow.
Our normal body temperature, as most people might know, is 98.6.
Yeah.
3 degrees doesn't really sound like a lot, but it can really affect how your cells react to basic bodily functions.
Okay.
There's actually 4 different types of hypothermia, 4 different severities: mild, moderate, severe, and profound. Most of us have experienced, if not mild hypothermia, something that's just before mild hypothermia, and that's called cold stress.
Oh, wow.
That's where we're shivering and teeth chattering, and we feel,
Oh, you can't stop. Yeah, I know what you mean.
You can't stop, and that's a good thing. That the shivering actually helps generate heat for the body to help you stay alive. And then mild hypothermia is where you have the shivering, you're uninjured, and you're alert, but you're not really able to care for yourself. And hopefully you have people around you that will then realize that you can't move well, you're cold, they'll wrap you up with, blankets or sleeping bag or more jackets. They'll give you a cup of hot liquid.
So at that stage, you're starting to get confused, are you? You say you're not able to care for yourself. You're starting to get disoriented. How does it manifest itself?
Yeah, not in mild hypothermia, you're not necessarily confused, but you can't do for yourself, but you can understand what the problem is. And if somebody hands you something to drink, you're going to drink it. You're very, very much aware that you're in trouble.
Right.
Moderate hypothermia, that's a little bit more severe. That's when the shivering starts to stop, and that's where the confusion starts to increase. Your physical movements are slower. Your brain functioning is slower. Wow. You might be stumbling around. So people who are with you, if you're hiking in a group, they might see you, not quite able to control your walking, your hiking, moving around camp. You're pale. Your skin is pale because the blood is now shunting back to the organs to help keep them warm.
Wow, it does that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So it literally is that your body's defense trying to keep certain things going, and it goes first back to the organs.
Exactly. They said they'd rather probably try to lose a finger or a toe or an earlobe than to lose the liver or the stomach or the heart.
Okay.
So yes, that's why you get so pale.
Right.
And then if you are unable to be warmed up, at that point you go into severe hypothermia, and you could be unconscious. People will, if they try to check your pulse, it may be very slow or irregular. Your respirations are very slow. If you happen to be conscious, you may have very irrational behaviors, such as being very combative. Somebody will offer you something hot to drink, and you'll say no, and you'll just toss it in their face or something.
Oh,
There's
God.
another very interesting behavior called paradoxical undressing, where you're so cold and your hypothermia is so severe that you'll actually start taking your clothes off. And that's really very dangerous.
I thought that was going to be a far better story.
Nope, that's and it
paradoxical undressing.
For some reason the hypothalamus in the brain, which is our organ that helps with the temperature regulation, is just so deranged that it makes you feel like you're very hot, and that's why you start taking your clothes off.
Wow, that is amazing, isn't it? Okay, so how do you try to treat these different hypothermias then? Is there a same treatment throughout, or does it vary depending upon the level of hypothermia you have?
It varies depending on the level of hypothermia you have. The mild hypothermia, it's pretty easy to treat. Warm drinks, warm clothing, and shivering. Warm sugary drinks are really important. First of all, you want the warm drink. It'll go into your stomach, into your system. It'll start warming up your core body temperature. Your core body temperature will then warm up the blood, and the blood will then warm up the extremities.
Wow.
You need the sugar or the carbohydrate in a sugary drink to replenish your energy reserves. You're shivering, and shivering takes energy. It takes work.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure you have enough fuel in your body to continue that shivering, because the shivering actually increases the core body temperature as well and will hopefully bring you out of hypothermia to a normal state if you allow it to happen.
So if your body is shivering, is it doing it for the purpose of warming you up?
Yes, that's what it's doing. Yeah,
amazing.
So if you're getting your warm drinks and you've got some warm clothing and you're shivering, and you then after about 30 minutes your body has warmed up enough, that's when you can now start moving around, exercising. Right. And that will further increase your ability to keep your body warm. Okay. It's very important to realize that you shouldn't start exercising right away because, believe it or not, the increased movement of your body will increase the rate of blood flow. You'll have cold blood from your extremities going back into your core where your heart and your lungs are. Right. And that will actually further worsen hypothermia. So wait until you've got the drinks, wait till you're warmed up, wait till you stop shivering. Then you can start to move around.
Intuitively, you think jumping up and down and shaking your arms is a thing that, well, I would have done that. I would do that, I guess, if I was really that cold, because I would have thought that would have worked for me. But you're saying that's actually counterproductive.
If you're in the mild hypothermia, so if you're in the pre-phase, the cold stress phase, that's where you're still able to fend for yourself. That's the time where you can do the exercising and try to warm up. But when you're starting to stumble around a little bit, you're starting to not be able to, you're very clumsy. You can't, you have to hold a cup, for instance, with two hands as opposed to one. Right. Your movements are a little sluggish. That's when you just have to sit for a little bit and let the shivering take hold.
Sure. Now, what about moderate and severe then?
So moderate and severe, that requires emergency rescue. If you're the person who has a hypothermia, you need to let others call for help. You need to get search and rescue out there, call 911, whatever you can do to now be evacuated. If you are not the victim of the hypothermia, you can still help this victim while you're waiting for rescue. Yeah. First and foremost, make sure you yourself, if you're not the victim and you're helping somebody, don't you develop hypothermia yourself. You got to take care of yourself as well. Otherwise, all bets are off. Yeah. But there are certain things that you can do for the victim. You can shelter the victim. If you have a tent or if there's a shelter there, especially on the AT, or if a cabin or something, get into shelter. If you don't have any type of shelter, then you can create a self-contained shelter for the patient. First of all, put one of the sleeping pads on the ground. You don't want the patient to be lying on the cold ground. That'll just worsen the amount of heat loss from the body.
I'd imagine.
Then wrap them in sleeping bags. The outer layer should be actually what we call a vapor barrier layer, so that any moisture that's in the air will not get close to the patient, because wet, cold environments actually worsen hypothermia.
So basically you wrap them in the sleeping pads and bags and then put something like a tarp or a tent fly on the outside of them to keep the vapor in.
Exactly. Okay. If you think about it, your tent fly is a moisture barrier for your tent, so that's going to really be very effective. It's kind of like a little bit of human saran wrap. Make sure that they can breathe, okay? You don't want to wrap them up completely. You have to have their face exposed so that they can breathe. Okay. And then you keep them there. Don't move them too much because, again, like the exercise that I was talking about, you don't want to move their limbs too much because then, again, that can shunt cold blood from the extremities to the heart and can further exacerbate the hypothermia.
Okay.
Having said that, it's also important, though, to get rid of wet clothing. Yeah. But it's best to cut it off rather than to try to remove it manually because, again, you want to avoid moving the patient as much as possible. Wow,
this is a real takeaway for me that any movement of the patient is really against their patient's interest. You would have thought just a slight movement would help, but just no movement at all if possible.
Again, within reason, but you don't want to try and wave their arms up and down thinking, I'll just move the blood around.
Yeah.
It is best to try to cut away the wet clothing.
Yeah,
these
sure.
are actually, just to give you a reference, these are guidelines that I culled from various sources, including, again, Wilderness Medical Society 2014 guidelines for treatment of hypothermia.
Okay, cool.
So if anybody wants to look in more depth, they can access that online. It's a really fascinating article.
So how do you avoid getting it in the first place then?
Okay, so the best thing is prevention. Before you walk out the door, like for people who are section hiking or people who are weekend hiking, look at the weather. Find out what you've got in store.
Yeah.
And dress for it. People who are long distance hiking, oftentimes you'll be able to access some sort of weather prediction, weather forecast for the next couple of days. If there's anything remotely cold, snow, wind, rain, anything that's going to make it so that you're going to feel colder, you want to make sure that you bundle up appropriately.
Sure. Yeah.
Synthetic and wool fabrics are best. Cotton is probably not the best idea in a cold, wet environment. And lots of layers, loose-fitting layers, because then the air can circulate through and your body heat can warm that air, and the layers can help keep it in.
Okay.
Make sure to cover your head and your body with a hat, and stay well hydrated and well fed. Again, we talked about carbohydrates and fluids. It's important, if you have plenty of carbohydrate reserves, you'll be able to stay warmer longer.
Right. Wow. That's really important then. I didn't realize that either.
Yes. Very, very important. Believe it or not, both hypothermia and hyperthermia, it's important not just to drink, but to drink and eat, because your body's cells are working overtime and they need as much energy as they can get.
Sure.
Try to stay dry. Wet skin and wet clothing will increase the rate of heat loss, and try to stay out of the wind. Wind chill factor, that's another thing that you look for when you are looking at the forecast. Look at the precipitation amount or the likelihood of precipitation. Look at what the wind chill factor could be. Look at the temperature. All those things can help you to determine how you're going to be able to dress and stay out of trouble.
Well, funnily enough, they're all great tips, and I've learned about 3/4 of what you said. It's all new to me, so that's really helpful. But Lynn and I were talking before, and she's also got a piece which we're going to do next week on frostbite, which is really more for hikers who hike during the winter, which she says she does. But I think this is very, very helpful, Lynn. I really appreciate it, and we'll talk again next week on frostbite, okay?
All right, looking forward to it.
Lovely. Thanks a lot.
Take care.
Cheers. Bye. I learned a lot there. By the way, it's important to know that these dock spots are supposed to be more informational than terrifying. Being forewarned about what could happen will make it less likely that something will happen to you, and if it does, you'll know how to act. My second piece of news this week is that the new Jesser, 60-year-old Bruce Mattson, will be making his debut this Monday morning in a brand new podcast, Returning to Katahdin, an Appalachian Trail Dream. Also sponsored by Trailtopia. Yep, they liked us so much that they did it twice. Bruce and I will be talking about his long-held desire to hike the AT. Let's just say he didn't decide to do it just a few weeks ago. As a bit of a taster though, here's Bruce's response when I asked him about some of his previous hiking experiences and how his great adventure is being received by friends.
Someone asked me the other day, because it's becoming more and more real, and many of my friends know that I'm going to be doing this, and they're like, well, what's the longest you've ever been out there? And I said, I don't think I've spent more, other than a canoe trip, I don't think I've spent more than 4, maybe 5 nights out at one time. So
wow.
That part will certainly be different. And a lot of my hiking and backpacking was 30 years ago.
So, look out for Returning to Katahdin, an Appalachian Trail Dream. It's going to be available on iTunes and YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcasts this coming Monday morning, November the 6th. I'll also be posting links on Facebook. You can catch Bruce at his website, returningtokatahdin.com. Next week, I'm reaching back to my class of 2014 once more. Another of those fierce women, and I mean that entirely in a complimentary way, as you know. I'm speaking with the lovely Stacey Buckland, or Styles. If you've been listening closely to my books at the end of each episode, you'll know why she was called Styles. Suffice it to say, I was able to learn something about women that had entirely escaped me for the previous 61 years. Stacey's a delight, and I can't wait for you to meet her. Last and hopefully not least, Chapter 28 and the conclusion of my second book. It's probably not too much of a spoiler alert to let you know that it's about Katahdin and that glorious day in September 2014 when I fulfilled a dearly held dream. I had one last chance to get particularly British on somebody, and in the end I was lucky enough to share my triumph with a couple of people who will always be very special to me. I tend to think that life is about moments, and whoever you share those moments with are, almost by definition, special to you forever. See you next week. Chapter 28, Katahdin and Beyond. Katahdin had always been our goal and had loomed at the end of my guidebook as a monumental climb that would bring to bear everything I had learned as both a hiker and as a climber. Somehow it seemed so fitting that we would finish with one last effort that would exceed all those that came before. Those previous miles were our preparation for this last trial. Katahdin was named by the Penobscot Indians. The name means the greatest mountain, a more than apt representation of its role in the lives of all AT thru hikers. It is steep and formed from a granite intrusion that dwarfs everything around it for miles. In the 1930s, Governor Percival Baxter protected the area around the mountain, establishing Baxter State Park in the process. I'm not entirely sure how much protection the mountain needs, as it is part of some of the oldest mountains in the world. However, protection it gets, and that has led to some harsh words between hikers at the end of their journey and state park rangers. It seems that the rangers object to the celebrations that erupt at the end of the hike as the famous brown sign is reached. Alcohol and dope are commonly cited as the drugs of choice. The proximity of families to these apparently abhorrent practices seems to inflame the passions of officials more than they really should. Surely some form of release is understandable when hikers reach a goal that hasn't just been 6 months in the making. More often than not, it is a culmination of a long-held dream. A slug or a toke doesn't seem, to me, to be entirely out of order. That said, all hikers should realise, if they haven't already over the previous 2,190 miles, that we are lucky to have the opportunity to take advantage of the American park system, one of the finest in the world. Daft behaviour on the part of a few selfish individuals may well take the northern terminus away from Baxter, and in my view that would drastically alter the feeling that hikers get when they reach their goal. The Appalachian Trail, when I attempted it, was pretty much perfect in every way. I'd hate for future generations of hikers to be denied the glory of summiting Katahdin just because some oaf couldn't resist the temptation to have a spliff or take a glug of warm champagne as a bunch of kids hovered nearby. Having said that, I confessed to taking a glug of said beverage when it was handed to me from one of the other hikers at the top. Perhaps my plea for some restraint on both sides should be seen from that slightly hypocritical standpoint. I was aware of none of this controversy when I awoke on that final morning. It only erupted on my return and during 2015. I suspect it will drag on for some time. Trillium and John packed up and headed out at 6:20 a.m, while T-Bird and I went to find Leidenot, who was being returned to the park from Millinocket with Deb and Mama Jean. I was sad that we wouldn't be summiting as a team. We had shared the majority of New Hampshire and Maine together, though I understood Trillium's need to complete the journey with John. It isn't my story to tell, and I certainly won't go into any detail, but Trillium had told us all a couple of weeks before that she had tried to hike the trail in 2012. She had experienced a horrific incident that left her with a reduced lung capacity, along with several other issues that must have plagued her mind since then. The incident took place one evening when she chose to camp just off the trail by herself. Her return to the AT required an enormous amount of courage. It also explained, at least to me, why she was such a hard-headed pain in the arse all the time. She actually told me the story one day as we were descending an especially difficult rockfield. Never being one to let people off with a truncated version of a story, I pressed her for more details about her reaction to the incident. Having gone into the whole story, she then blithely told me that she would do it all over again and that, should the circumstances arise, she would camp by herself once more. I think I called her a bloody idiot at that remark, so we had something of a falling out. Even though things had returned to relative calm between us, I could see why finishing this validating quest was so important to her. John, her supportive partner through what must have been very difficult times, was the right person to be with. There was a signing in sheet for Katahdin, then Lydnot, T-Bird and I posed for Deb as she took a few photos. We set off up a long, easy incline that eventually took us out of Deb's and Mama Jean's sight. They told us they would be there on our return. Lydnot kept turning round fully and waving as if he were a 5-year-old on the first day of school. His attachment to both his wife and his mother was touching. I felt that he was lucky that they were there to share his triumph. At one point, Deb had wanted to make the climb, but he had talked her out of it. We had warmed up for over 2,000 miles while she would have been taking a shot at it cold. Lydnot had agonised about suggesting that she should stay behind, but it was the right decision for both of them. Deb would have found it extraordinarily difficult, while Lydnot would have constantly been watching her. It might have impacted the safety of both of their hikes. The going was comfortable for a mile or so, with the weather cooperating, though it looked cloudy further up the mountain. The trail started to rise gradually, and while it was arduous with plenty of scrambling up intermittent rocks in our path, it was hardly beyond our capabilities. We made good progress for a couple of miles. As we got higher, the trees became more sparse and we emerged above the tree line. Then we hit the rocks. All of a sudden we were into proper climbing, with hand-over-hand stuff that required thinking about. We negotiated our way over steep rocks and pulled ourselves up using metal bars driven into the boulders at some of the trickiest passages. White blazes would appear in seemingly unattainable spots, even though there was always a way to reach them. It was a kind of vertical Mahoosuc notch, ever rising, ever challenging. New Hampshire had prepared us well for this. I felt in my element, enjoying it hugely while we made our way ever upwards. We posed for a few photos as the clouds were starting to come down and meet us by now. Eventually, we emerged onto the flatter tablelands. The cloud had enveloped us and we stuck together as the path followed a less strenuous rise. We didn't know precisely where we were because we couldn't see much more than about 50 yards in any direction. Our excitement was mounting, and even though we heard voices from time to time, the end kept being delayed, with the hill cresting again and again in front of us. Then I heard a more prolonged chatter and excitement. With just about 75 yards to go, I was able to make out that iconic sign, the sign I'd dreamed of for years, and the sign that had been in my thoughts for much of the past 6 months. Various hikers were silhouetted at the top, surrounding the sign with an exuberant reverence. I'd moved ahead of the other two by this point, although T-Bird was close behind me, with Lydnot some way behind her. We had passed Trillium and John a short while before. Drawing nearer, I thought of Diane and my sons. I was fighting to hold back tears. I had thought of them many times before on this journey, along with everybody else who had played an important part in my life, and I hoped that I had resolved to my own satisfaction the relationship that I wanted to continue to nurture, as well as some I wanted to let go. I had worked out many of my responses to the moral issues of the day, and had even finally rejected the possibility of God. As I touched the sign to signify the end of my trip, I wish I could say that I felt something deeply meaningful. I simply felt grateful. I was relieved that it was over and that I hadn't been injured or even worse. I patiently took pictures of T-Bird on the sign before I climbed up onto it myself. The relief flooded out of me, and I let go a full-throated roar of achievement and delight. The pictures recorded perfectly what I was feeling in those heady moments. I then stepped to the side and called Diane and Rob, with both conversations ending in my tears. Diane was delighted for me, but now more eager than ever to see me home. When I confirmed that I'd be back with her within 24 hours, I choked up. Composing myself, I called Rob. He started me off again when he referred to me as Mighty Blue for the very first time. It was a wonderful moment that I will take with me to my grave. While I was on the phone, I saw Lydnot approach the sign slowly, then bend and touch it. He offered a silent prayer to God, with whom he has an enduring relationship. I didn't take a picture, but it was another one of the abiding sights that lodged itself in my brain. Trillium and John were there as well, and she was silently exorcising her demons at the sign. I was touched by the sight of the two of them together, each understanding what this meant to the other, sharing their emotions in isolation from the rest of us. We even managed a final picture of our band of 4 that neatly capped off our adventure together. The descent presented us with similar problems to the ascent. In some ways it was even tougher to climb down some of the steeper rocks as opposed to up them. However, we were driven by adrenaline and our own thoughts, arriving back safely. It had taken us just over 3.5 hours to get to the top, and a similar time to rejoin Deb and Mama Jean. I could already feel that the band was breaking up, and we were soon to go our separate ways. Having shared such a common purpose with each other and with others over the entire journey, it felt difficult to say goodbye. In many ways, the separation, when it came, was so quick and final that it was probably for the best. Lydon and his family took both T-Bird and me into Millinocket. They dropped me at the Appalachian Trail Cafe, with quick hugs before moving on to their respective destinations. I had managed to contact a couple of members of my local Appalachian Trail Club. These were Tim and Vicky Edwards, who had generously offered to run me from this cafe to a hotel near Bangor Airport in preparation for my return flight the following morning. Suddenly alone, waiting for Tim and Vicky, I sat quietly with a final burger and looked around me. A sense that I was returning to real life hit me. I knew that my days and nights in the woods were over. There would be no more crummy motels and hostels. I felt calm and satisfied that I now had something extraordinary to help define me. It was also an accomplishment that could never be taken away from me. My enthusiasm that had left me with so many incomplete projects had been banished from my psyche. I was no longer haunted by my own disappointment with myself. I truly felt a better person for going on this hike. Tim and Vicky turned up shortly after and grilled me about the hike on the way to the airport. I'm afraid I was a bit unresponsive. I felt terribly disconnected from them and I couldn't understand it. They were hikers and probably understood, so they left me to it. Some frantic laundry that night allowed me to return home the following morning with a pack of clean clothes when I met Diane at Sarasota Airport. She held on to me as we embraced and celebrated my return. As we got into the car, Diane turned and said with a face that reflected complete disgust, "What on earth is that smell?" before gagging and hastily opening her window. That is actually a truncated version of what she said, the original being considerably more graphic, though it conveys the message. Unfortunately, I had forgotten to wash my fleece. I hadn't worn it too often in the previous couple of weeks and felt that it wasn't in need of a wash. What I had omitted to take into account was the fact that I had used the fleece as a pillow for about 500 miles. It had become my go-to since I left my actual pillow in a bunch of washing that many miles before. Of course, the gradually accumulating stink had not registered with me. We drove the remainder of the way home with the windows down, not for the first time in the previous 6 months. 4 months later, I went for another walk. This was more of a local stroll, but it resonated with me so much that it stuck with me. In the 4 months since I had completed my hike, things hadn't gone as I had expected them to. I had been under the impression that, once I returned home, I'd be able to slip back to my old life without missing a beat. I entirely underestimated the effect the trail had on both my body and my mind. I knew that it had been physically demanding, yet I also knew that my body had met the various challenges. I had adapted well to each rise and fall in the terrain when I encountered them. Indeed, it was the constant engagement and disengagement of muscles that was the first thing I had noticed physiologically on the trail. That said, I was physically exhausted. It took me about 3 months before I was able to run up a flight of stairs, while I lost most of my toenails and my feet grew a full shoe size. My knees ached, though that soon eased. The Appalachian Trail is going to examine you physically in a way few things ever can, but it will shred your mind if you let it. I was aware that I had shown a mental toughness that some had questioned at the outset. I hadn't doubted myself, but at the same time I had no idea what I'd face on this trip. It turned out that my apparent strength of purpose was all bluster on my part. Nevertheless, I built the mental toughness as I hiked, so I got there in the end. My mind played tricks with me. I could feel glum and I could feel content, though I was not often able to identify between the two. My emotions were strung out the whole time by the confluence of my past and the time I had to think about it. Allowing that to happen let me face, and at least own up to, who I was. My local stroll around the neighbourhood could not have been less like the Appalachian Trail. For a start, there were no roots ready to pull down the unsuspecting traveller, nor were there rocks to either climb or slip on. I should also record that the very topography of Florida leaves out those pesky mountains that get in the way from time to time on the AT. Lastly, there appeared to be no animals out to eat me, which is always a bit of a bonus on a walk. As I reflected further, I realised that the feeling of being disconnected I'd felt with Tim and Vicky Edwards had remained with me. Nothing in my life had been how it was in the woods. Nothing in the woods had been how my life had felt before. My very roots had been pulled from me by the hike. I felt vulnerable for probably the first time in my life. My thoughts were constantly churning in my head, and I found my previous focus to be utterly missing. Being retired, I would find myself walking around the house in an apparent need to do something, though achieving hardly anything all day. I even suspected I might be depressed. In fact, when I broached this subject with an old friend, a Vietnam veteran, he said it might be some form of PTSD. "Minus the part with the Viet Cong shooting at me," I immediately commented. Since I've returned home to a considerably more sedentary lifestyle, my wife has regularly remarked that I'm far too hard on myself. I've never been this way before, with neither self-doubt nor self-recrimination clouding my day. I have pinpointed my hike as the start of this new, slightly bemusing habit. It is certainly one of the more negative things I've taken from this experience. I now find it more difficult to give myself a pass for things not done. Diane says that I ignore the many good things that I do during the day and only get crazy about the things I don't do. Some might say that this is a positive development, but I don't cope with it well. It is certainly a lasting legacy of my hike and one that I'm constantly battling against. I really can't wait to get back to no self-recrimination. Life was far easier with that as part of my makeup. I vowed never to hike again and had even included that comment in a number of presentations I did locally, much to my audience's doubt and amusement. Despite that, the woods rarely left my thoughts. Lydnott and T-Bird started talking about doing the John Muir Trail in 2016. I wasn't in the least bit interested. One day I watched a film on Netflix with Diane called Mile, Mile and a Half. It was a documentary about the JMT. As I was watching it, I turned to see Diane looking intently at me. "You want to do it, don't you?" she asked. I hadn't realised it, but yes, I did want to do it. Diane has long been a proponent of living your best life, and particularly given her own curtailed circumstances, she encouraged me to join the other two. The three of us, along with T-Bird's husband, are scheduled to start the hike in early June 16. As for the rest of it, I've stepped up my involvement in the Family Partnership Centre and become far more charitable in my thinking. Carrying everything on my back allowed me to understand how little I needed, giving me a greater awareness of those who actually have nothing and heightening my empathy for their plight. It is hard to believe that there is such poverty in the richest country in the world, but it's there, folks. You just need to open your eyes to it, and it will be all around you. Once I'd realised how out of focus I'd become, I started to discipline myself to write my story, although that too seemed to share characteristics with the hike. Lots of time alone, in your head, and quite a marathon to complete. Now, over a year down the line, some of my focus has returned. I enjoy reflecting upon my adventure in a way that I wasn't able to in its immediate aftermath. I'm still sometimes concerned at the thoughts running around in my head, but I wouldn't change a thing. I've had the opportunity to think about those I met on the trail, and especially the friends who came to visit me. In retrospect, I've looked back on the achievement and see what they all saw then. Hiking the Appalachian Trail is something extraordinary, but something that can be achieved by anybody if he or she is prepared to commit fully to the task. Diane allowed me the space to work out what I wanted to do in my life, and I think we were both taken aback at the change in me. Yet, this is now me. I like myself a whole lot more than I did. I've come to terms with many of my mistakes and bad behaviour in my life, and I've assumed a resilience I hadn't previously suspected. I've also ruled out any possibility of the existence of God. This has, perhaps counterintuitively, allowed me to gain control of my life and my own happiness. I have a moral code that isn't centred around somebody else's idea of what is right and wrong. My code was handed down to me by my parents. Now that I am no longer constantly anaesthetised by alcohol, I pay a lot more attention to that code. All in all, I'm okay with the person I became. Who'd have thought that my own Appalachian trial would provide me with such a diversity of riches, yet turn my life upside down? I had to walk nearly 2,200 miles to discover who I was. I wonder what your Appalachian trial will give you.